everyone. Thank you for checking out this episode of Nerd Caliber. I'm here with Kia Sangria, and today we're going to talk about Lore Olympus. What do you have to tell about this webcomic?
Hi guys, I'm Kia. I am a avid Lore Olympus fan. I'm actually a Lore Olympus cosplayer as well. I love this series, and I think that everyone should be reading it. This past Saturday, it's now Sunday, so this past Saturday was the season finale of Lore Olympus season 1, and it was very dramatic. I was not expecting what Rachel gave us to end the season off with, but I'm happy she did, because I think I speak for a lot of us Lore Olympus fans when I say that we really wanted to see like Persephone go off, and Rachel delivered. But before I get into my thoughts about like season 1 as a whole, I kind of just want to go through a couple of characters in the series just to talk about my thoughts on them. I'm going to start with the character that everybody hates the most. I'm going to start with Apollo. I really like how Apollo is written in Lore Olympus. I think he's the ultimate villain, especially because he's not villainous as in like in some, pop culture shows and things like that. He wants to destroy the world, but he's really just the personification of like a toxic guy. And I think that, I feel like maybe all of us in some way, shape, or form has like dealt with somebody like this in our lives previously. And I think he's like the perfect combination of just like a very entitled, almost like psychopathic individual. And so I like the way that his character is portrayed, because first of all, in their own way, all of the gods are toxic in Greek mythology, okay? Really nobody is safe from anything. But the way that Apollo is written in Lore Olympus, it's like, yeah, a lot of us have been there. And so I think we all collectively hate Apollo, but I think that the way he's written is just so good. And I really cannot wait for him to get what is coming to him, because he's just a complete asshole. And the way that he goes about displaying those tendencies are so toxic and so manipulative that you like sometimes it like when Rachel before an episode will put like a hey trigger warning, I immediately know it's like probably Apollo. And even like my anxiety rises when I'm reading the chapter or getting ready to read the chapter, because it's like I love the way Apollo is written, but I hate when he's in an episode because he's just so bad, but he's so good at being bad. And I think Rachel did a great job with writing his character. Also, in relation to his sister Artemis is also a very interesting character to me, because it seems like for me, she believes that her brother can do no wrong, even though he is the most terrible person to Persephone. And I feel bad because it's just like, here is your brother that has assaulted your roommate, and one, you don't know about it and you don't suspect it. And then also your roommate is kind of just like living here pretending that everything's okay. So it's like, it's one of the like most frustrating things to like see when you're like reading Lore Olympus, because you just want to tell Artemis like, listen, your brother is the worst, and I really need you to get hip to that. So, and I'm looking forward to seeing like how that plays out when Artemis does eventually find out what Apollo did to Persephone, because when Apollo is around, for me it's almost like Artemis is under some type of spell, because I feel like she's just oblivious to everything that's happening under her roof. So that I can't wait to see. The next relationship that I want to talk about is actually Hera and Zeus. This past season, there were like very interesting moments for Hera and Zeus, especially in relation to like her kids, like Ares. And there was a point in the season 1 comic where Hera starts to actually figure out that somebody did something horrible to Persephone. I don't remember clearly if she knows it was Apollo, but she knows that somebody did something very horrible. And she brings it up to her husband, Zeus, that, hey, listen, something is wrong, something is not right, and Zeus just kind of brushes it off. And I feel like in that instance, it's kind of a display as like boys will be boys, because as a husband, Zeus is the worst. He's a terrible husband to Hera. He constantly cheats on her. He's not discreet about it either, which is like, it's absolutely insane the way that like their relationship is written. And in the comic, we see that the only reason why Hera is kind of with Zeus is because she didn't want to be the queen of the underworld by being with Hades. Because during the course of season 1, you do see that Hera and Hades had something going on as well. And I feel really bad for Hera. I mean, Ares, her son, will describe her as angry, and literally I quote, like, oh, mother is always angry. But I think Hera has a very good reason to be angry, because honestly, Zeus is just constantly out here embarrassing her and not even pretending to actually give a shit about her feelings, which is when one night when Hades and Poseidon, the three brothers, are together, and you know, Zeus comes out to Hades and says, like, you know that I love Hera, but it's just like you don't show it. And it's really interesting seeing all three brothers interact when it comes to talking about their relationship issues. And by like all three brothers, I mean Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. Because out of all of the characters in the Lore Olympus series, even though he's not shown a lot, Poseidon actually has one of the healthiest marriages out of all of the Lore Olympus characters, in my opinion. There was an episode where Hades was talking about his relation to Minthe and how he feels about Persephone. And on one hand, it's like Hades is a very abused character. But on another hand, Poseidon kind of tells him, well, you know, you're not physically having an affair with Persephone, you know, behind Minthe's back, but what you're doing could possibly be considered emotional cheating. And I feel like emotionally cheating is something that's not talked about, because when we think about cheating on a significant other, we normally think like physically cheating, but it is possible to emotionally cheat on somebody, even if they may deserve it because of how Minthe was abusive to Hades. But it was very interesting to see Poseidon be the one to kind of bring that out there, because as a character in the Lore Olympus series, he's kind of written as like a bro, like he's kind of chill and down for whatever. I think honestly that was probably the most intelligent thing he said all season, where it was like, oh, you're actually emotionally intelligent, which was really cool, and I really like that. But yeah, Zeus is a terrible husband, and I think what I like about Zeus's character is because even in the mythology, he's a terrible husband to Hera. So it's very interesting to kind of see that play out in the comic as well. Moving on to another character that I had high hopes for this season, but we didn't get to see that, was Minthe, who is Hades, his now ex. During the season 1 story of like Lore Olympus, we kind of see a lot of their relationship and how it's just a very toxic relationship. No good can come from it. But it's very interesting, kind like watching Minthe and Hades navigate each other, because Minthe is a nymph, and nymphs are kind of seen as like servants in a way in the Lore Olympus series, in my opinion. And so when it comes to her being with Hades, it's like a big thing, because it's like, here you have this nymph who's literally dating the king of the underworld, and that's a really big deal. And so seeing Minthe and Hades' relationship progress like in the comic, it hits home for me, because like personally my husband came from a relationship like that before he met me, and so seeing that play out, it's just like, wow, this is like, I've seen this before. And that also just kind of shows you how relationships like the relationship that Minthe and Hades have is very common. But unfortunately, when it comes to men being abused in relationships, they don't get as much attention. And it's really unfortunate seeing, like, you know, Hades go through the things that he goes through with Minthe, because it happens to men in real life and we don't talk enough about it. But that's another thing for another day. So, you know, introducing like Persephone onto the scene of like Minthe and Hades and their relationship, it's very interesting to see Hades kind of move from a state of, you know, feeling unsafe and feeling unstable in his relationship to finally finding someone who gives him that sense of safety and stability that, you know, I can agree that we all look for in our relationships. But seeing Minthe kind of react to him getting that was also very interesting, because it mirrors exactly what an abusive relationship is, where your abuser tries to keep you isolated and they try to keep you focused on them, and they try to keep you boxed in so that you can't really imagine what your life could possibly be without them there. And so when we see Hades and Persephone get closer, and we see Hades start to come out of the box that Minthe had originally tried to put him in, because, you know, there's a part in the comic where Minthe tells Hades that he looks exactly like his father. And that's a very big blow to him, because Kronos literally ate him. He literally ate his kids. And so to hear from someone that you care about tell you that you remind them of someone who has done really horrible things to you, I think that was the straw that broke the camel. Well, not I think, it was the straw that broke the camel's back when it came to the relationship that Hades had with Minthe. Because by that time, him and Persephone had already gotten close enough to recognize that they have some type of romantic feelings for each other. Not enough to act on them, but to know that those feelings exist. And you know, he was finally at a point where he started to feel safe, but that was still a really big blow to him. And just for some background on Hades and Minthe, Minthe works for Hades. So I believe she is his secretary. So they work together. So you're saying this to not only the person that you're dating, but the person that you work for. And so, you know, for him, it was like this relationship, it just wasn't working out to begin with, because it's not a professional relationship. They work together and then they're dating, and it's just really not that good. And so I think that at that point in time, the entire fandom kind of already knew where the relationship was heading. But I had high hopes for Minthe after the breakup, because I started to think that maybe she would start to become better, and that maybe the season would end with her being better. But we didn't get that last night. So I still think that there's redemption for Minthe. I would love to see her be redeemed, but I know even in like the traditional Greek mythology that doesn't happen. So I can't wait to see what Rachel does with that. Moving on, Hades. Hades had enormous growth this season, and I'm really proud of how far he has come with dealing with his emotions and his self-loathing. Because I think he has a lot of self-esteem issues, and we do get to see that take interesting shapes, which is I appreciate it, because we don't really get to see that side of men that often. I feel like even though he's king of the underworld, the way that he's portrayed is very raw. And in the original Greek mythology, he became the king of the underworld, I believe, through a bet. Like, I think he lost a bet with his brothers, and that's just the job that he ended up with. So it's not even a job that he ever actually wanted. It's just those were the cards dealt to him. But it's interesting to see his growth, because he does become more in tune with his feelings. He does start to recognize some of his toxic tendencies. And so kind of seeing him try to work through those emotions by like the letters that he writes to Persephone, or the things that he says when she's not around, we really get to see a more human side of him him, as opposed to like the king of the underworld that everyone is so used to. Because I mean, it's the king of the underworld. We expect him to be scary, we expect him to be mean, and we expect him to be nasty. But he's actually not that. He's not his job title, I would say. I think he's a very sweet person. And so seeing his growth from being in this toxic relationship with Minthe to kind of recognizing Persephone, and then finally figuring out exactly what it is that he wants and needs from his relationship, I think it's very interesting to see. Because again, in reality, we don't really get to see that side of men that often. And so I would love for more men to kind of explore that and kind of talk about their feelings more, and just be like, hey, like, this is what I need, and this is what's not working for me. Because I feel like, again, when it comes to relationships, I feel like men are often silenced, or they're shamed from speaking about, you know, what hurts and what they feel. And so I really absolutely loved seeing his growth this season, and I hope that we get to see more of that with him. But I also hope that we get to a point too, like in real life, that is normalized, because I feel like that's missing when it comes to relationships. Next character that I want to touch on is Demeter, who is Persephone's mother. We don't get to see too much of Demeter in season 1, but when we do see her, we do see that she is very manipulative, and that can be translated as protective, but I will call it what it is. I'll say that Demeter is a very manipulative mother, and I was excited to see in the final episode where Persephone kind of took a little bit of a stand against her mother. And, you know, I believe that we will hopefully in season 2 get to learn more about Demeter and the reasons why she took certain actions when it came to Persephone in the series. Spoiler alert, the last episode prior to the season finale episode was when Persephone and Hades meet. And Hades was drunk, unfortunately, when he landed on Demeter's doorstep. And at that point, Hades and Persephone had already had their own side conversation. And so when Hades tells Demeter, hey, who was the pink goddess that was here before? And Nymph was like, I mean, not Nymph, but Demeter was like, oh no, you must have most certainly like seen a nymph. And he's like, no, that was a pink goddess. Like, who is she? I wonder if she's available. Maybe I'll ask Zeus about her. And at that point, Demeter was trying to get Hades to sober up by making him coffee, but then she quickly changed her mind. It was like, you know what, let's have wine instead. So it obviously, you know, it's obvious that Demeter was trying to hide something from Hades. So I think that she knew something about the relationship that's blossoming that we didn't. But that also goes back to how manipulative that she actually is. And I am really excited to see more of that and like what kind of secrets she has, because we know that she's been hiding something about Persephone, and we actually got to see what it was she was hiding about Persephone in the season finale. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but what we got to see last night is exactly what Demeter was hiding, and I'm really excited about what we got to see. I already bought a new dress. I'm going to cosplay it. I think we all just really wanted to see like that side of Persephone. And you know what, to close out like my analysis of each character, let's talk about Persephone herself. I think she's a very, very confused individual. And I know that we've all felt like that in our teens, you know, angsty, anxious. But seeing it play out for her is quite interesting, because puberty for her looks a lot different than it did for us. And watching Hades and her get closer, it's very interesting to see, because she's so sweet and she's so cute and she's so bubbly, but she's also very scary. She's very scary, and she's scary in the Greek mythology, but she's also scary in the Lore Olympus series, especially if you saw the season finale. And I think seeing that scary side of her that we saw is even more of a reason why her relationship with Hades works perfectly, because she doesn't have to pretend to be scary. She is. And I hope that we get to see more of that in the next season. As much as I love sweet like Corey Cobb and pink cinnamon roll Persephone, I also like the Dread Queen Persephone that we're starting to see come up. And honestly, most importantly, I just really want to see that raft directed at Apollo, because out of every one of the series, he deserves it the most. And I hope that we get to see that. I mean, I want Hades to, you know, get at Apollo too, but I really want to see Persephone take her power back, because she deserves it. She deserves it completely. And to close, one of the things that I noticed about the season finale is that what we saw wasn't present time. It was more of a flashback, or rather a retelling of what happened in the past. And the episode before that, we saw that Demeter had actually showed up at the apartment where Persephone was staying with Artemis. So the big question now is, where is Persephone? Because she's not with Hades and she's not at home with Artemis. And if Demeter is showing up at the apartment that Persephone stayed in with Artemis, it's safe to say that she's not with her mother either. So I have two theories. My first theory is that Persephone is with Apollo. I think that she may finally be letting her anger take control of her in order to lash out at him and attack. Because it's been a long time coming, and we have been asking to see this all season, and we have not gotten it yet. So part of me thinks that Rachel is going to finally give us some action concerning Apollo and Persephone. But then the other side of me is also thinking that she may possibly be with Hera. And I say Hera because I believe that in terms of Persephone's relationships to people in the series, I think outside of Artemis, Hera is probably the only other person that she trusts. And also, we know that Hera is aware that something happened to Persephone. So in my mind, if she's not with Apollo and fighting him, she might be with Hera, possibly coming clean about what had happened to her, confirming Hera's suspicions that yes, something terrible was done. Spoiler alert for the season finale, we end off with Minthe and two of her friends, Hades and Thanatos, telling Zeus about what Persephone did. If you want to know what Persephone did, obviously read the season finale. But we end with them telling Zeus what Persephone did, and Zeus agreeing that Persephone should face consequences. And for me, it's like thinking back to Zeus's reaction when Hera tried to tell him that something horrible was done. You know, he kind of brushed it off. So for me, I feel like in the next season, we'll come back to Hera and Zeus. Zeus knowing something horrible that Persephone did, but Hera knowing that something horrible happened to Persephone herself. And so we may possibly end up in a place where Zeus is like, well, this is what she did, so I don't care what was done to her because this is, you know, not acceptable for gods and goddesses to do. But then Hera might be like, okay, I get that part, but this doesn't change the fact that something very, very horrible happened to her, and she deserves justice for it. So I think that we will kind of see Zeus and Hera go at it in the next season about who was right and who was wrong in relation to what he has now found out and what she may possibly find out later. So that's where I stand when it comes to like the season finale of Lore Olympus and just season one as a whole. The gods are messy. It's such a dramatic series, but it's so great. It's so well written. And yeah, August is a very long time for me because like literally like Saturday night at 9:00, I look forward to like just hopping on my phone and reading the next episode. So to know that there's no new episodes next Saturday kind of sucks, but I'm ready for season 2.
Oh, excellent. So yes, fans out there, let us know what you think in the comments below. And thank you very much.